Dale Planning, Zoning, and Building Committee meeting of December 9th, 2010. Will the minute taker please call roll?
Alderman Lewitton. Alderman Roy Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Coles. Alderman Police.
Here.
Alderman Cadella.
Here.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Winger. Alderman Shockey.
Here. We have a quorum present, and will the minute taker please note that Alderman Lewitton has just joined the meeting as well. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting dated October 14th, 2010. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second, please? Thank you. Anything on the question? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? One abstention. Motion carries. The next item is a report and recommendation, a request for variation, T-Mobile Telecommunications Facility at 444 West Potter Street. Ross, I will ask you to take it from here, and we'll start asking you questions then, sir.
Okay. What you have before you tonight is a request by T-Mobile to construct a telecommunications tower next to our water storage facility on Potter. The tower with the antennas and lightning rods and everything attached to it would be 150 feet tall. It needs variations due to the height of the antenna and its setback from the side and rear property line. It should be noted that to the side property line that needs the variation is it's adjoining the ComEd high tension lines. We have asked ComEd if they had any concerns or objections regarding this tower being so close to or in proximity to the high tension lines, and they indicated they had none. And to the rear is the tennis court for the apartment complex that is adjacent. At the public hearing, there were a couple of residents who were somewhat concerned about the aesthetics of the issue, but of the tower being there. However, with the improvements that T-Mobile is willing to make with landscaping and security to the facility, the Community Development Commission did not feel that these were, I don't want to say valid concerns, but they were not a concern for the city, and they did approve the matter 4-0.
Mr. Clicker, would it be appropriate of me to ask what kind of revenue stream the leasing of this property is going to bring into the city?
At this time, you were given a draft of the land lease agreement that is being developed. At this time, dollar figures have not been put in there. However, we have told T-Mobile from day one with this that considering that we have just within the last year finished a lease agreement with Verizon for a tower in a separate location to basically be prepared for that as a minimum. And that tower receives us an annual rent of $24,000 a year with a 3% annual increase. And also, Verizon made a $5,000 one-time contribution to the city of Wooddale to consider this antenna. So we have told T-Mobile, and they are very well aware that those are the terms that will be expected of them.
Okay, couple of concerns real quick, then I'll take questions and comments. I'm not comfortable approving, to be perfectly honest with you, a variation when the only reason we would consider doing this is still undecided, and that's the actual revenue stream. I understand that the goal is to match, if not better than what we have with the other carrier, but until I know for sure where we're going to stand, I'm uncomfortable. Secondly, while I do understand that this would be next to the high-tension lines, which are not attractive anyway, to put this into perspective, this thing is 150 feet tall, approximately the same height as our water tower on Irving Park Road that everybody's familiar with. That makes it very tall. I would have to feel very comfortable with the amount of revenue that we're bringing in to agree to deface the city with another scar like this. That's just my opinion. I will call questions. Alderman Wesley.
You take him first.
Alderman Shockey, did you?
Alderman Wesley.
Oh, the other Wesley, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have a question about the agreement, the casualty part of it, 29. If something happened to the tower, and I mean, it's probably unlikely that something would, but if it got hit by lightning or whatever, they don't pay during the time that it's not working, according to the contract. Is that correct? And if they just leave it, it'll just be a blight type of thing if they just don't want to fix it. I'm not sure the wording on the contract.
He doesn't know yet. It'll be at least 25,000.
The language is identical to what was put into the Verizon lease agreement. I will ask our city attorneys to double check that and make sure that that is appropriate.
Thank you.
Alderman Shockey does bring up a good point. I'm concerned that we may just have another big question mark on this thing.
Again, this is, at this point, this is just for the variation aspect of it. The, as you know, as the zoning board, or I'm sorry, the Community Development Commission, it's going to take me a while to get used to that, did put a condition of approval on it that it is subject to an acceptable land lease agreement with the city. I would recommend that that condition remain at this point because, again, this would go to the council for the recommendation for the city attorney to draft the appropriate ordinances, and by that time, obviously, the appropriate ordinances and the lease agreement would be finalized by that point for your review.
And I do understand that, and I don't necessarily want to pay the city attorney to write an ordinance that we may not approve. But I do have a concern, should we be okay with a part of this and it's approved tonight, then it gets confusing as to why we may not want something about it later, and the necessity for a supermajority, should it be approved unanimously tonight. I'm afraid we may be a little ahead of ourselves. Once again, that's only my opinion. Alderman Eugene Wesley?
I have a couple of questions. I believe our mulch pile is stored there now. Where would that go? John, you want to answer that question?
The current mulch pile is located at that ground storage facility. We have been looking at decreasing the amount of bulk storage material we keep. So if it looks like from the plans, Ross and I discussed that there would still be sufficient space to keep a much smaller pile there for resident use. That's really what it was originally intended for. It has become more of a dumping ground for Public Works to store the mulch there prior to it either getting hauled off site to a facility that ultimately uses it, because we really just don't generate either the community interest in it or the needs of the city to reuse that material. So we would probably still use a portion of that facility, but in a much smaller degree.
Okay. May I do a follow-up? Couple of
Follow-up,
questions?
yes.
The other concern, are we going, in the lease agreement that we're discussing, are we going to have access to that tower to put one of our antennas on there if we have to?
Yes.
Or that is an agreement? All right. The other question I know we approved one already on Riker. Am I correct? Riker. I did go back and pull the same lease agreement. And the lease agreement that was submitted to us today for approval is not identical to the lease agreement that we had with the other one. The reason why I'm bringing this attention is I don't want to get in if this is passed tonight, I don't want to get in a war here that this tower got a better deal than this tower. The lease agreement needs to be done right. I did pull off the thing, and there is something missing in this lease. The lease also agreed, item number C, the leaser also agrees to make a one-time payment of $5,000 to the city. That is not in the lease that is in front of us today, but it is in the Horizon one that was submitted. There's also not in the lease that was submitted to us today, a 3% increase annually rate, 3% over the period of years. That is not in this lease agreement that is submitted to us tonight. So my recommendation is those changes need to be put in this lease agreement. And then I believe you said it's $24,000 a year?
That is what the Verizon lease agreement is. I can guarantee you it will not be anything less than that.
Okay, so it's guaranteed 24,000. The only drawback I have on this lease agreement, that needs to be addressed before it comes to us. I have no problem of considering this, providing that we got access to that tower too, in case we have to move one of our tenants off that water tower or whatever we may have to do it, or the police department may need.
That was a
That's
direct
for
question that was
agreement.
asked of the petitioner at the Community Development Commission meeting, and they indicated that, yes, there's absolutely no problem with the city having access to the tower.
And how many units will be on that tower?
Right now, this is for T-Mobile. T-Mobile is constructing the tower. There is space for 3 additional carriers on that tower. If any additional carriers were to go on that tower, they need to seek a ground lease from the city to place their equipment. So we would receive additional revenue should additional carriers wish to go on that tower.
But again, now that you brought that to our attention, that is not also in this agreement. I did not see that in this agreement unless I missed it. I might have missed it,
I will
but
double check it.
that needs to be put in there. And the other thing is, how much is T-Mobile going to get if AT&T decide to put a tower to their, what is their cost that they are charging another firm?
That's their cost. That would be something that they would negotiate privately with that carrier, whatever carrier that would be, say it is AT&T, would need to negotiate a lease with Verizon to go on the tower, and they would need to negotiate a lease with the city to occupy the land where their equipment is going to go.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Roy Wesley was next.
Ross, you mentioned about some people that had some concerns. What were those concerns?
The visual aspect of the tower, they felt that the visual aspect, looking out at it, was not something that they wanted to do.
How many?
2.
And how much of a, did you send letters to
Yes,
these?
sir. Sent letters to everyone within 250 feet. It totaled, I have the complete list here. 59 properties were notified. And part of that notification was I did notify the associations of both the apartment complex and the Georgetown townhomes.
Okay. Last time we had a presentation, I think it from the, where they wanted to put a tower up in the, by the water treatment plant.
Okay.
They gave a presentation. Do we not,
Keith from,
I mean, there was a hardship there of why they wanted to put the tower there.
right. Keith is here, if you'd like to address that, why the tower
But,
needs to be located.
That's okay, because where I'm going tonight is, since we don't have a number in this, again, I'm gonna go along with Alderman Cadella. I don't agree that we should go any further with this until we get some numbers, because you could sit here and say, yeah, $24,000. That's hearsay. Until I see something from them that they're saying they're going with.
Again, I just would like to remind the council that this will come before the council for an authorization to have the city draft, the city attorney draft the appropriate ordinances, and then the ordinances and the final lease agreement will come back before you for your approval at that time.
At the council level,
Correct.
but this is committee level.
And, okay.
So, at that time, I'd like to make a motion to table until we get those numbers.
There is a motion to table on the floor. We had at least 2 other comments that, at least maybe 3 that people were all asking to make. Would you mind holding your?
I'll hold.
Okay, thank you. I think Mayor Johnson was next.
Ross, at the beginning of the presentation, I thought you mentioned something about landscape screening, and I see on the conditions of the variance, it's only a chain link fence.
Correct.
Is there a modification?
On the site plan that was presented to you all in your packets, there, you'll notice there's a row of landscaping that will be installed immediately adjacent to that fence to help screen it.
So are you recommending that as a condition of granting the variance?
Yes, sir.
And then I have a question to Keith, if he is here. Do you agree with Mr. Clicker's interpretation that if 3 other leaseholders go up at that site, that is additional leases to be negotiated with the city, or it's included in the land lease agreement with you? Please.
Please also state your name and affiliation you're with.
Keith Nyman, I'm with SureSight Consulting Group representing T-Mobile. The numbers that have been discussed were what I was given from the initial onset of this project, the $24,000, the $5,000 down. The ground rent is a issue with the city and any carrier coming along. So that's understood. And any carrier that comes on is two agreements. So if they're going on the tower, that's a tower agreement with T-Mobile, and any ground space is going to be negotiated with the city.
Because I note in the lease, it's for a 25 by 75-foot area, which would include the space for those 3 future lease areas. So you're stating it is your position that that would be a subject to a different negotiation with the city, even though you have the land lease for that area?
The lease parcel was basically established to show where they were going to go, because there's the mulch pile, there's an access easement or access area to the west of that area. So it was basically established as the lease area or the area that's going to be utilized by the carriers. But
I'm
the
getting at
ground,
my interpretation of the lease, and I won't speak for the city attorney, but sometimes I can't avoid myself. You're leasing the entire 25 by 75-foot parcel according to the terms of the lease. And that would give you the right to sublease to future carriers.
what it is it's the T-Mobile lease is smaller than that. Their area is smaller than that. They're going to go on a concrete pad. They've laid out the 25 by 75 for all 4. It does vary. The ground space will vary depending on the carrier. Cricket, Clearwire come out with a 7 by 12 pad. Others come out with a bigger one. It was kind of to establish the area that's going to be utilized. But the ground space for the additional carriers is definitely going to be with the city.
Because that's not what the plan shows, or it's not what your lease agreement says. I think Alderman Wesley was correct. That's already included in the lease parcel, at least in the site plan that you gave us. But I guess the attorneys can work that out.
I've been back and forth with Mary Dixon. That Verizon agreement from June of 2009 was provided to me, and I was told to hold off until the first meeting went forward.
Alderman Shockey had a question prior to Alderman Wesley's
Yes,
motion.
Mr. Nyman, I've noticed other towns have a grouping of aerials, and we do have a big one on Mill Road and right next to the ComEd lines. Is there any reason why this antenna could not go there? I don't know if that's in Wooddale or if it's in Forest Preserve property or Itasca or what over there, but it would seem that if you're going to put up a second aerial, why not put it up by the one that's there now? And it's not going to cause another area to be, have something like this in it.
If I'm understanding you, there's another area, how far away from Potter and
It's
Station?
No more than a block and a half. It's on Mill Road, which is the next road west, and right where the ComEd lines are, it makes a curve and goes west. So it's no more than a block and a half or 2 blocks further west, southwest. And I don't know whose antenna that is, or who owns it, or whose property it is, but if you're gonna put antennas in, why not group them together so it's not destroying the looks of more than one area?
Well, it's definitely a different carrier. If they're on a ComEd tower, is that what you're saying?
No, they're next to the ComEd towers. They're just south of the ComEd towers on Mill Road on the west side of the street.
That may be beyond Wooddale city limits. I'm not entirely sure. I'm having a hard time picturing next to the church. I'm having a hard time.
Next to
So
the
that would be
church.
probably outside of,
Don't know, well, the church is in Wooddale, so,
right, the
Right.
church is, but it's a fuzzy, it's not a straight line.
Yeah,
there.
it
But
may
you-
be.
but I think that's I mean, from a common sense, and aesthetics
So
point of
that-
view, it makes sense. So, I mean, it's something, I think
you can
it's.
take a look at that.
Several sites were looked at. Each carrier has their own. For T-Mobile, this is a fill-in site. They've got sites established surrounding it, and they're coming in trying to provide additional coverage. So where you're saying, if you're saying it's a block away, we looked at several sites, existing structures to go on. The ComEd tower lines are 50 feet lighter than this one. This is actually a 140-foot monopole with a 10-foot lightning rod.
The one out there, I think, is at least as tall as the ComEd lines, a good 40 feet away, like this is, and it's very close. Why not put two of them there? Even, it may not be in Wooddale, and we wouldn't get the money for it, but it might look better aesthetically. Something they should look into before we acknowledge this one.
Let's plan on talking to staff and having staff get back to us on that site. Maybe, Dan, you might be most familiar with it. Ask Ross offline, because I think if there's nothing anybody else feels is urgent to discuss tonight, I'm going to ask Alderman Lewitton.
Ross, I just bring it up for public mention that I discussed with you that sections 9 and 10 don't conform to our insurance codes.
Again, that will be
And
passed
you
on
will,
to the attorney.
and you're going to pass it on, and when we get the next draft, it'll be correct.
Correct.
It'll be corrected.
Thank you, Alderman Lewitton. Alderman Wesley, would you mind restating your motion, please, if you still feel it's appropriate?
Very simple. Motion to table.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. That is to table, clarification, table to another committee meeting.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item, report and recommendation on involuntary annexation policy. As a reminder to those who were here last Thursday and the kind residents of the unincorporated area that came out, I think it was Tuesday night also, to restate concerns, ask some really good questions. And for those of you who have not been at either meeting, so you know what's going on, the discussion here this evening is with regards to involuntary annexation in general, policies that so far have not been either stated or documented within the city. So bottom line is we're looking to ask and answer some questions, big picture with regards to how involuntary annexation happens, and then focus on some of on all of the questions and concerns that have been brought forth to us so far. So the purpose for this evening is to discuss that. At a future meeting, we will then take what comes out of policy discussions and apply it to the site-specific area, which are your properties. So with that, I will ask Mr. Forrest to kind of kick off this conversation, however you feel appropriate, probably restating some of these questions and concerns, and we'll start filling in some policy answers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wooddale in the past has had very few involuntary annexations. Typically, with the annexations we deal with are when a developer buys a large piece of property, or perhaps when a group of residents in an unincorporated area want to incorporate into the city to take advantage of the sewer and water availability, perhaps, feel more comfortable increasing emergency response time, those sort of items. At the present time, we really don't have a clear-cut singular policy concerning involuntary annexations. And I think because of that can create the difference between people willingly wanting to annex into the city and people being faced with an involuntary annexation is that it can create a lot of fear of the unknown. There's a lot of questions they have. They're concerned about what sort of expenses they're going to be required to pay right off the bat. We do have a section that I attached to the memo, section 17102I of the Unified Development Ordinance, and while that section does not specifically say as soon as you're annexed you must hook up to city water and sewer, if you kind of follow the yellow brick road through the other sections of the municipal code that are contained in that, one of them requires annexed property to become part of the DuPage County Water Commission. Well, how do you do that unless you hook up to city water? Same thing with the sanitary sewer hookups. If a line is within 200 feet of your house, you're expected to hook up. Well, when people are kind of involuntarily, faced with an involuntary annexation, again, two of their biggest concerns are financial, related to the cost of what's it going to cost them to connect to the water and the sanitary services. And then, of course, they have the prospective increase in real estate taxes. Other concerns would be how will incorporation affect what schools and park districts they might use? Will fire protection and police protection change? Who will provide garbage service? What will the new address be? How will that affect mail delivery? What post office will they use? And what effect will the annexation have on the present use of their property? All of these need to be fully explained to the affected parties in order to alleviate this fear of the unknown. What I did on this memo was kind of break down for you what it would cost somebody to tap onto city water and sewer, and these would be the charges that they would have to pay to the city for a connection. For a typical residential hookup to the water and sewer, fees due the city of Wooddale would be $2,845. Now that does not reflect any outstanding recapture fees that might be due upon connection to the water lines. And again, some of our unincorporated areas would have recapture fees that those homeowners would be responsible for. This figure also does not include what a resident would have to pay to a private contractor to install these service connections from the city mains into their house. Estimates to install the water and sewer, for example, for a simple 50-foot run from the street connections to the house, could run anywhere from $5,500 up to about $6,000. Also, you have to add an additional approximate $1,000 for that, for the septic tank to be pumped. Typically what they can do, the health department will allow them to crush that tank on site and then backfill it. So you could be talking anywhere $6,500 to $7,000 for a simple hookup to the city water and sewer. That would be their contractor's fees. If the installation is more complicated or additional lineal foot is required, in other words, if they have to go in and maybe go around a tree, perhaps come around the back of the house, it could easily climb to $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, plus then you have that $1,000 fee. So as it illustrates, these charges can be kind of a surprise to people and can easily create a financial hardship. In an effort to respond to concerns by our potential new residents and to make involuntary annexation as painless as possible, there are sections in our codes that could be readily applied to properties that would be involuntarily annexed. Article 6 contains the provision that allows structures already incorporated to keep the existing private well and septic systems and to repair them without having to connect to the city systems, even if they're available. So again, I mean, there are a few sections in the code where there's some conflicts. Also, section 7103, which is already in the municipal code, does allow people to keep their existing well and their existing septic system as long as they're properly maintained. They cannot replace the septic if it goes bad. They cannot drill a new well, but they would allow to keep their existing well. Again, there are some contradictory code sections in here. Typically, when that happens, the strictest section is what we're supposed to apply. Section 7402B of the Water Sewer Regulations, again, that's another section that allows residents to keep their private sewage system until such time as a city main is installed within 200 feet. At that time, they would have to connect. Depending on where that sewer main is, you could still be talking about a lot of money for somebody to have to hook up to the sanitary line. As far as some of the other questions that residents have, school districts and park district boundaries are determined geographically and not really by a town or a city. So properties annexed to Wooddale would not expect a change in school or the park district affiliations. Fire district boundaries that serve the unincorporated areas contiguous to Wooddale, those are pretty much set right now between Wooddale, Addison, even Bensonville. We could expect response time to improve after incorporation, as 911 calls would come directly to our dispatch center. They would not have to go to DuPage County first and then get shuffled back here from DuPage County. Police response time and overall residents' level of protection will improve as emergency responders will be directed, again, from our dispatch center, and they won't have to wait for response time from DuPage County Sheriff. As to some of the property owners' questions regarding rezoning, each property upon annexation is zoned R1 as it comes into the city. And this is the highest residential zoning, requires the largest size lots. Properties typically are rezoned to the appropriate zoning classification upon annexation, and typically that's done by what is surrounding that property as it comes in or what best is going to fit the needs of the city. Costs associating with such rezoning typically is just the cost for the legal notice, and again, on newly annexed properties, it's my understanding that the city usually picks up those costs. So as far as recommendations, in an effort to assist potential new residents brought into the city by involuntary annexations and to make the transition as painless as possible, it would seem prudent for the city council to consider some flexibility with the issues over which we do have control. We have little or no control over changes in real estate taxes, fire protection districts, school districts, or park districts, if that should occur. But we can look at the regulations concerning water and sewer connections and strict enforcement of other sections of the municipal code, such as the property maintenance code. And we can take a look at the non-conforming zoning regulations and see how we can work with our prospective new residents. So as far as some recommendations from staff, we would recommend waiving requirements that would require immediate connection to the city water and sewer and make the requirement consistent with section 7.103 and allow maintenance of existing wells and septic systems not for a determined amount of time, but until such time as the existing systems fail or need a major reconstruction. We could require periodic testing to confirm the systems are in compliance with the health department regulations. Perhaps we could institute a moratorium on enforcement for a determined amount